disco music. Thank you, James. It's great to be here for a lot of different reasons, but I haven't been in this quote-unquote movement on mindfulness as long as Jim has or Barry has, or many people in this room, but since 2008, when I went on my first 5-day retreat, I started coming to different conferences, and it really was known, I think, to people who wanted to see this expand and grow, that the business community in the country had to see this as beneficial if it was going to move out past the meditation retreat centers of the United States. So it's really great to be in New York City, to be with so many people who are interested in how this could maybe be helpful. I was watching TV the other day, and I have this, when I first met Jim and Barry, I was single, and in the last 3 years, since I've been married for 3 years, as of last week. I told my wife, I said, honey, they said we'd never make it this long. And she said, who said that? I want the name, I want the number. No. And so I had this very different kind of lifestyle. I was single, congressman, and could pretty much pick up. I was going on lots of retreats. I could do, pretty much whatever I wanted outside of work. And then I got married. So she got rid of her place. I got rid of my place. We bought kind of a neutral place. So I went from being single, being able to kind of do whatever I wanted, to being married. And so my wife also brought 2 kids to the marriage. So I went from being single to being married with 2 kids. And so we got, we had the house and everything. So, what do you do when you marry a woman with 2 kids and you got a new house? What's the first thing you do? You got to go out and get a dog, right? So we go out to get a dog, and what's the first thing you do when you go out to get a dog with 2 kids? You come back with 2 dogs. So now I go from being single to being married with 2 kids and 2 dogs. So, and then 2 years ago, we had a little baby. So now we got 3 kids, and Brady's will be 2 months old in June. So my life has changed a lot since the long 7-day silent retreats I used to be able to go on. And so a few months back, I noticed something that I hadn't noticed in a long time in the house. It's called silence. So all of the kids and all the dogs and everybody, they were all upstairs, and I was downstairs. So what's a former quarterback sitting on the couch in his new living room do when everyone else is upstairs? You grab the remote control, right? Because I hadn't seen it in months. We got bubble guppies on. Mickey is very famous in our house. Now Minnie, Goofy, Pluto, the whole crew. So I get the remote control, and I start flipping through. So what's a guy do from Northeast Ohio, former quarterback? You try to find some sports on TV. So I see a documentary on one of the sports channels. And it's a documentary on the 1983 North Carolina State basketball team. And you remember Jimmy Valvano, the great coach? They still have the ESPN awards for Jimmy V. So Jimmy V is giving this speech as I'm watching, and he says, God must have loved ordinary people because he made so many of us. But every day, ordinary people do extraordinary things. That every day, in so many different ways, ordinary people do extraordinary things. And when I heard that, I thought, that crystallized why I got into politics. I used to coach, I used to play, but this was about helping and help figure out how you can allow ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And to me, it was limited by policies. It was limited by legislation. That's very helpful and can be very helpful. But it's about something more than that. And so when I had my own personal experience after that first 5-day mindfulness retreat of how empowering it is to understand what's going on in your own mind, to really know thyself the best you can, because that feeds into every other relationship and decision that you're making throughout the day, week, month, year, in all of your relationships. It's so empowering. And I tell the story, and I'll spare you all the details, but at the end of this 5-day retreat, there was a 36-hour period of silence. And each day you can feel your mind get quieter and quieter and quieter. You could see your thoughts coming and going and coming and going. And then I remember after this 36-hour period of silence, one of the first few thoughts I had was, why didn't somebody teach me this in school? Like, this is so fundamental. I just think of all the stupid things I did in my life that I maybe could have just avoided one or two of them. Would have changed everything. Or relationships or decisions within relationships that you wish you would have made differently. So this knowledge to me became a big part of what I'm going to be for in my public life. Because a lot of people have this private, I meditate, don't tell anybody, you know. And then you have this separate private life. And never the two shall meet. And I just had the experience that I couldn't do that. I couldn't go on and just be for Pell Grants and roads and bridges and all that. And all this stuff is important. I'm not here to diminish it. But it's about so much more than that. It's about helping ordinary people do extraordinary things. And the best thing that I feel we could do is to create systems around human beings that can help them meet and reach their own full potential. And that's what it's all about. These systems can change, but if you don't have great people in the system, then it's not going to work no matter how good the system is. And we see it in politics all the time. Great candidates win elections. Bad candidates lose elections for the most part. Thank God. You may have a different opinion on that. I do have a friend who went to Congress once, and he said, you know, for the first 2 years I was in Congress, I thought, how the hell did I get here? And then after about the second year, I thought, how the hell did they get here? So we got to try to create systems. And so from the public policy side, I want to and have worked on since I really had this experience and understanding and researched the science and wrote a Mindful Nation, how can we shift our systems to really empower people to help ordinary people be able to do extraordinary things? And so I just want to share with you for a few minutes some of the things that we've been working on, but I also want to give maybe 10 or 15 minutes for questions because I'm interested in to hear what you're interested in, because this is a pretty unique day for me too, to have this many business people be forced to listen to 35 minutes of what I say. And I'm going to take advantage of every minute. So that experience of wanting to and desiring to have learned this at an early age really inspired me to figure out, you know, what we could do in the field of education and how many people are doing great things in the field of education around social and emotional learning and mindfulness practices, relaxation practices, and those kinds of things that can really help you calm down. And so when you understand at the basic level, and somebody may have talked about this already today, what parts of your brain you need to really function properly as a leader or in society, or really to be able to reach your full potential, you're talking about maximizing, for the most part, your executive functions that are located in your cortex, your prefrontal cortex part of your brain, where you have your decision making, your working memory, your attention span, two or three things that are really important to having some success in life. But what I learned is that when you are very stressed out, or you have long periods of stress, or you're under a great deal of stress in certain moments, you go into fight or flight mode. And when you go into fight or flight mode, you can't access these executive functions. So to have a program that can help teach kids at a very, very young age how to de-escalate, how to self-regulate, so that then they can access the parts of their brain that they need to be able to learn, to me that seems pretty fundamental. And so we've identified different educational programs, and the idea is to expand them and blow them up. And I'll give you an example. So I was in Northern Virginia at a school, and it was a pretty tough school. Gangs, lower income, and they were teaching kids social and emotional learning and mindfulness through the Mind Up program, which Goldie Hawn runs and started. And these kids would learn how to have a little bit of quiet time. And so we toured the school, and they were actually teaching about the amygdala, which is the older part of your brain that deals with fight or flight. And I remember walking down the hallway and seeing, it was like the old school art project that we did in school back in the day, where you'd have a paper plate and there was yarn on there, and it was a real throwback. So as I was walking down the hall, I looked up and it had this paper plate and it had red and blue yarn on it, and I looked underneath and it said amygdala. So I leaned over to my staff and I said, "What's amygdala?" And they were teaching these kids in the classroom that when you're really excited and you're in fight or flight, it was the red yarn. Your amygdala was all hopped up. And when you were relaxed and you were well regulated and balanced, it was the blue yarn. So they were integrating this idea into the curriculum so that the kids were learning about their brain, but also learning how to regulate themselves. And so we walk down the hall and we actually sit with a group of kids, and they ring the bell, and we did about 2 or 3 minutes of silence, and then they went around the room and they were asking kids, "So what came up? What was on your mind?" And one of the kids said, "Well, I got a test next period or whatever, and I'm a little worried about that." And another kid said something else. And then this little kid, he had his head down. And the teacher called on him again, and he still had his head down. And she said, "Johnny, what was on your mind?" And he said, "My brother never came home last night." And, started crying, so then we started crying, because it was just such a touching moment. And so the teacher came over, a couple of the other kids gave him a little hug. The teacher came over and said, "Well, let's go to the office and let's call home and see if he's back." And I just thought to myself, if that poor kid, at least, as bad as the situation was, at least he had an opportunity to know exactly that was bothering him and express it to someone else, and to have been connected to those other kids in his schools and be comforted by his teacher, and someone cared enough about him to bring him down to the office to make the call. And I found out a few weeks ago that the kid's brother got killed that night. I ran into the superintendent at a dinner, and I told him that story, and he said that didn't end well. And so you think of how much can accumulate on a kid that's in a tough neighborhood, maybe domestic violence in the family, and here we are as politicians, and I'm the first to say teachers need to make more and we need to invest more in education, but I'm not really for throwing a bunch of money in education if we don't understand some of the basics of how the brain works. And this money needs to go to teaching teachers and teaching kids how to make their brain function at an optimum level. To me, I think it's easier to ask people to help support schools if they know that the money's going in a direction that is going to take this kid to the next level, or take these kids to the next level. And when you come from an older industrial area like mine, You know, we've always been focused on how do we change these neighborhoods, and we got to spend money to knock down old, dilapidated homes. Youngstown went from 160,000 people that lived in the city now to about 60,000. So we've got to spend a good deal of money just knocking homes down because they're crime-ridden, drugs, prostitution, and all the rest. But you're not going to change that neighborhood if the kids going into that neighborhood don't know how to de-escalate problems as opposed to escalate problems and make matters worse. And so if we want to stop funding or lower the burden for security and safety and everything else and the crime issues that we have in our communities, then we better be smart on not just where we're putting our money, but how we're putting our money. And I think social and emotional learning and mindfulness and these programs are, to me, the best I've seen in my 16 years in public life, to allow young kids to be able to do extraordinary things. And you're helping the teachers. I mean, you look throughout our public sector, teachers, cops, firefighters, nurses, high, extremely high levels of burnout. I mean, you can't even hardly get teachers or kids to go into teaching today. And you have teachers telling kids, don't go into teaching. In Youngstown City Schools, 9 years without a raise. 9 years. Very difficult circumstances. So we got to take care of our teachers and to watch them embody the practice and then bring it into the classroom and shift the whole tone. So in Warren, which is a town just a little bit north of Youngstown, we're just west of the Pennsylvania border in Ohio, we got $1 million 5 years ago to do social and emotional learning and the mindfulness program, inner resilience program that Linda Lantieri runs, and she's done a phenomenal job. 5 years ago, K through 3, we had 240 out-of-school suspensions. 240. So I had them run the numbers last couple weeks ago for me. As of this year, with this program being in for 5 years now, we have 14 out-of-school suspensions this year, K through 3. So if you want them to learn, their butt's got to be in the seat first and foremost. They set up a whole program where they have a little center for the kids where the kids do peer mediation. So if there's a problem, there are peer mediators in their classroom who have been trained to go down to solve the problem with the kids. And it's been amazingly successful. And so you think about the qualities that you want in people coming into your business. You want them to listen. You want them to not fly off the handle. You want them to be able to regulate their own emotional state. You want them to focus. You want them to be resilient. You want them to be gritty, to get knocked down and be able to get back up. Keep persevering, whatever the project may be or the plan may be. And so we need to start teaching those basic qualities at a very, very young age. And you think about these kids going out into the world. If you're a millennial today, you're going to have 35 jobs in your lifetime. That seems tiring. Jeez. I mean, just the resume updates. My goodness gracious. So we better give them the public policy initiatives, portable health care, portable pensions, portable job retraining money, portable welfare benefits if you're moving, if you have to move. All of these things need to be portable. But you also need the skill set to be able to emotionally move through these, refocus, re-engage into your new job opportunity that you're going to have. We got to start teaching that at a very, very young age so that our workforce embodies it. And when you think about, and you all know this better than me, but I was reading it the other day in Steve Case's book, that half of our GDP in the last 50 years has come from scientific discovery. And if you look at the top 1% of startups, startup businesses, they've created 40% of net new jobs in our country. So scientific discovery, startups, small businesses, innovation, incubators, business software, additive manufacturing, nanotechnology, on and on and on and on and on. You need young, smart, creative people who work well in teams and think outside the box. And these are the basic qualities that the resiliency that these programs are starting to teach. So to me, that's a major cornerstone of what a mindful nation looks like. The other piece is the healthcare piece. And I see this in two separate areas that aren't separate, because and I guess they're not separate. I see this in two areas that are interconnected. My damn speechwriters got that one wrong. The one issue is stress, and the other issue is food. The issue of stress, which I learned about writing this book, is how bad it is for our health. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, knew this. I worry myself sick. My little Italian grandmother used to say that all the time, among other things. Swear words in Italian were the best. But that was an example of how we all kind of understand that there's this mind-body connection. And if we look at how stress affects our health, and we look at our health care costs, which you have to deal with in the private sector and on the governmental side, a third of our budget, about 33%, is Medicare and Medicaid. So if I tell my Republican friends, I'm a Democrat, I tell my Republican friends, if you guys are interested in the drivers of the debt, then you need to be interested in the expenses coming into the healthcare system. And if we don't get that under control, we have a real problem, because you're never going to be able to balance the budget, and you're never going to have money for research and development, roads and bridges, infrastructure, basic science, Department of Defense. You're not having money for any of that stuff if we don't get the health care issue under control. So the two pieces here are the stress level, and the other piece is the food level. And I bring the food in because a mindful nation isn't just about the practice of mindfulness. It's how do we start to see things a little more clearly? How do we start to see things as interconnected, and how one feeds the other? So we spend a lot of money subsidizing crops that make their way into very highly processed food. And this highly processed food now has us in a situation where we have, in the next 5 years, half of our country will have either diabetes or prediabetes. Half the country, which will sink those two healthcare programs that the federal government runs. It'll sink the VA healthcare system, and it'll make it very difficult for our defense budget, including defense healthcare. It'll suck every dollar out of our federal budget. And so we have to figure out a system where we take tax dollars and we pay farmers to grow these certain crops. And then now we got really sick, so then we subsidize the health care to take care of the people who got sick because the food's so artificially cheap, because we made it cheap because we use your tax dollars to, and you wonder why we're at 9% approval rating in the polls, right? The system is broke. And so we need to see all these systems as interconnected, that our healthcare system is directly related to our agriculture system. And our healthcare system and our agriculture system should be directly connected to our education system. And that we should be teaching this stuff in our schools, how to cook food, grow food, eat food that's healthy for us. Let your food be your medicine, and let your medicine be your food. That, to me, is looking at this in a way that's clear and sees the benefits. And if we move to a system where we are teaching people how to reduce their stress level, and we're paying, I don't mind paying farmers. Maybe we should pay them a premium to grow more fruits and vegetables and make sure that those houses we knock down in places like Youngstown, Ohio, that we build urban gardens and urban farms, and we put young inner city kids to work learning how to grow things instead of learning how to destroy things. And build that food network like my little Italian grandparents had their garden. I mean, if someone knocked out the power grid in the United States of America, how many people could go start a garden? I mean, I'm half Italian, so I can, but those of you who are not, that's a real problem because it's disconnected us from the earth. It's disconnected us from our food. And we can shift this system in a mindful nation by making a few separate changes. If we pay farmers to grow, and we're going to need a lot of the land we use now. I'm not here to say we're all going to have a garden and grow some herbs on our, outside our window in the city. But there is a movement afoot with rooftop gardens and vertical gardens and the technology that will come to support that if we invest in it, we could be the world leader and cut down transportation costs, keep food in the center of our lives, in the center of our cities, and I think make a big, big difference in food deserts in a lot of our communities. So the health piece can be addressed by both the stress piece and the food. And I was just doing an interview earlier today, and I was rushing here, and I didn't know what the interview was going to be on. And so I sat down, and he said, we want to talk about meditation and food. And I thought, this is really cool, because to me, these are so foundational. And I will say, and I hope some in this room agree, that to me, if you put that kind of food in the schools and salad bars and gardens in the schools, and you put kitchens in the schools and really tie the food programs in your schools to the health program in your schools, to the wellness program in your schools, that to me is the new Common Core. We have this big fight about the Common Core. That's the Common Core. Social and emotional learning. Social and emotional learning, mental discipline, focus, cultivation of awareness. Walt Piatt would call it situational awareness, right? What's going on inside you? What's going on around you? Big and an important part of your education. And healthy food. So you're functioning at a really high level. So you got a lot of energy. So you're not falling asleep in third period algebra class, and then we're going to blame the teacher and the principal and the superintendent. My kid's got a C in algebra. I have no idea why. I was at a school in Youngstown 2 weeks ago. They give out for breakfast a chocolate milk and a Rice Krispie treat. Okay? Now, so I got to go look at the chocolate milk. It's only 8 ounces, and it had 32 grams of sugar. So for every 4 grams of sugar is a teaspoon of sugar. So do the math, okay? And it had almost as much as a Coke, a Pop, called Pop in Ohio. I get yelled at every time I come to New York. It's soda. It's Pop. It's soda. Almost as much as a soda, okay? And a Rice Krispie treat, I didn't know how much that had. I didn't look, but I'm sure it wasn't 0, okay? So now this kid, that's his breakfast. And in these schools, you have 80, 90, in most cases, not most cases, but in some cases, you have 100% of the kids qualify for free and reduced lunch and breakfast because it's easier just to give it to everybody than to figure out who are the 10 or 15% of the kids who don't get it. So this is what 30 or 40 or 50% of the kids in this school are starting out their day with. That is unmindful. We're not paying attention. We're looking the other way on that issue. And then we have these education problems. And we wonder why we're 26th in science and 28th in math in these global testing competitions around the world, these rankings. So to me, if I'm going to do my job And my job is to help you do your job. If my job is to make sure you get a good product and make sure you have the proper transportation system and that we have enough research and development going on so that you can come in and capitalize on that, that's our job. Basic research, our job. Workforce development, our job. Education, our job. We're not doing our job, and it makes it harder for you to do your job. But we need you to help us push these kinds of ideas, not just in your company, but in the systems that are wrapped around your company that can help you enhance what you're doing by giving you a good pipeline of really smart, resilient, creative, thriving young people. And you know, if you're an athlete at Ohio State University and you're on the football team, national champs a couple years ago, just let that sink in. Why do you hurt me? Who did that? Was that you, Barry? Mean-spirited New Yorkers, I tell you what. If you're an elite athlete at that school, and obviously many, many others, they get you to the food table. You get the highest, best caliber diet. You get dietitians and nutritionists. You get study table and people to help you with your homework, right? You get the best workout facilities to make sure your body and mind are in the right place. You get everything you need to be successful. And I don't think it would be that much different or that hard for us to switch some of our systems to point in that direction, to really make a shift. But we need you to help us do this. And this will benefit your company. It's anybody who's practiced it or knows the benefits. And I think that's why you see, Mark Bertolini and Bill Ford and some, I just mentioned them because I know them, and what they're doing and implementing this into their workforce development. They get it. And I think you will too. But just remember that a piece of this is you got to help guys like me in my position and our position and in New York or wherever you are to really see you as a partner in trying to transform these systems. We got too much of this today. We sit down and do economic development in Youngstown. I don't ask who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, who's a conservative, who's voting for Ted Cruz, who's voting for Rand. I don't care. We got a project here that we got to get done. And I have my role at the federal level, and we got the state people there, we got the economic development people there, we got the business people there, the risk takers are there. Let's go. And so part of being in the mindfulness movement is to drop those barriers and help us come together. I would just say lastly, because I want to give a couple minutes for questions, amazing stuff going on with veterans. Probably the most important aspect of this work because we have 22 a day that are still taking their own lives. And I've sat down and meditated with 12 or 13 Vietnam vets, is one particular instance, where these guys have said to me, I wish I would have learned this 40 years ago. I lost my wife. I have no relationship with my kids. And he said, and finally, in this 12-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program, I'm starting to rehab some of those relationships. I'm talking to my kids again. I'm calling my spouse again. She's not answering, but I'm calling her, he said. And Jim mentioned addiction treatment and recovery. Great study that just came out with mindfulness-based relapse prevention, better than cognitive therapy after a year of being taught MBS, relapse prevention, RP. Very helpful with this huge heroin problem that we have going on across the country. This is making itself available and helping in so many different ways. And so for you to be here is really, really, really important. And the impact you can have to accelerate this over the course of the next few weeks, months, and years can really change our country And we need a new way to go about doing the business of your side and my side, the private sector and the public sector. We've got to find a new way of doing it. And Jim Wallace, Reverend Jim Wallace said, in this country, we don't need to go further to the left. We don't need to go further to the right. We all need to go a little bit deeper. And what you're engaged in here is the process of going a little bit deeper, and it will help you, and it will help your community, and it will help your country. Thank you so very, very much. I left 4 minutes for questions, sorry. If I was a senator, I wouldn't have left any, so be thankful.
What are you running for president?
We have a fundraiser right after this event in the back.
Thank you for, can everybody hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing this very meaningful talk. I especially appreciate you touching the healthcare and food the food industry. But I am also personally interested in helping the education and bringing compassionate circles within schools to support, the kids suffering and so on. Is there anything that from your experience already, that you'd like to see the community, help the teacher with to build those kind of circles, those kind of programs? Is my question clear?
Say it again?
Is there anything that you'd like to see the community of practitioners, help the schools to develop compassionate circles or those mindfulness practices,
Well, I think everything has to start where you are. So you've got to find one teacher, you've got to find one superintendent, to start, and then if you can help there. That doesn't seem like a lot, but we've seen this grow because, like when we went to Warren, and we offered it to all the teachers who wanted to do it, and then some didn't, and then they started to see the classroom next door change and become quieter, more disciplined, and all the rest. And so then the teacher said, "What are you doing in there?" And he said, "Well, we did that program, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Well, I went in. Why didn't anyone ask me?" We said, "Well, we did ask you. You didn't want to do it." But so my point is, find that one person that you can help. If you're a practitioner, one school, one family support group, one veteran, just do it wherever you are, and that's the best way to do it. Now, if you want a resource, is in the back of my book, A Mindful Nation, which you can get at Amazon.com. Is this on? No. There's a resource section, but you can, Mindful Magazine is always, mindful.org, always promoting what different people are doing in the field of this work in all these different areas. Take one more. One right here.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. So you mentioned initially you had a deep practice and you were able to go off to various retreats, and then now you have a life with a wife and 3 kids and 2 dogs. What does your practice look like now with a very full plate?
It's not bad. It's still pretty good. It had a little rough patch when Brady was born, the first kind of 6 months, 9 months to a year. He did not get the memo on my meditation practice, But it's still pretty good now. Usually at least a half hour a day, mostly in the morning. But I've gotten better at trying to reset during the day, like deep breath, okay, come back, try to come back. And then maybe do a little bit mostly when I'm in DC, I have evening stuff, so I try to do a little 5 or 10 minutes before I go out. And mostly in DC too, there's a pattern here you're seeing with when my family all lives in Ohio, so when I'm in DC, I also do like a hot yoga practice and then work out. But I try to at least 30 minutes a day, get some practice in. What time is it?
It's just barely 5:30. 5:35.
Yeah, we take a couple more. Yeah.
Say one more question, and then back there. Wait for the mic so everyone can hear.
Hi.
Hi.
What's the biggest challenge you faced in spreading this message?
Biggest challenge really is I think a lot of people don't even know what the hell we're talking about. Honestly. Like you'd say mindfulness to someone in Youngstown, Ohio. Yeah, that sounds great. Be more mindful, but I don't think they understand it. And so we actually had a meeting with the Surgeon General a few months back, John Kabat-Zinn, myself, a couple others, about doing a national campaign on mindfulness. And the real key is, when you look at addiction, when you look at obesity, when you look at some mental health issues, a lot of them can be addressed through mental health promotion, through really teaching people at an early age to how to deal with, what's happening in their lives and what's going on inside of them. And so I think a kind of a national campaign to just say, Phil Jackson does this and Kobe Bryant did it and Mark Bertolini's pushing it over here and Google's doing it here and all the different research institutions are studying it and really seeing profound benefits. The Army's really taking the lead on a lot of this stuff. And I think once people see it as a stress reducer, if that's what you want, but also a performance enhancer, if that's what you're kind of going after too, to take your game to the next level, all of a sudden, who doesn't want to be the Kobe Bryant of fill in the blank, right? I mean, who doesn't want to be the Phil Jackson of your company? And when you put it in that context of really reaching your full potential, helping ordinary people do extraordinary things, then I think that's a really good entry point. And what we've tried to really do too with as far as promoting this, the school stuff's really powerful because everyone just internalizes and understands what the impact is. But when we talk about this with veterans, it is like nobody questions. What is this? Where did it come from? Who are you? What religion is? No one asks any of those questions. It's like it's helping a vet who was not doing real well, and they sacrificed for us. So the biggest impediment is awareness, coincidentally enough.
Thank you, Congressman Tim Ryan.